Urbanística es un espacio para conversar y aprender sobre el entorno natural y construido de la ciudad de Santo Domingo, desde la perspectiva de que todos los usuarios somos expertos en nuestra ciudad. Con estas conversaciones, procuramos ofrecer nuevas formas de observar y comprender nuestras experiencias urbanas, crear sensibilidad como una forma de apostar hacia una mejor calidad de vida para todos. Este episodio llega a ustedes gracias a Caedro, distribuidores de Vectorworks en el Caribe, México y Centroamérica. Hoy tenemos a Claudia vía Zoom. Hola, Claudia.
Hola Michelle, muy contenta de estar aquí en este episodio extraordinario de nuestro podcast. Y hoy tenemos dos nuevas cosas. Tenemos nuestro primer invitado internacional y yo por Zoom.
Así es. Nosotros estamos muy contentos y le damos la bienvenida a Urbanística porque tenemos hoy con nosotros al arquitecto paisajista australiano Adrian McGregor de la firma McGregor COXALL. Hemos pedido disculpas porque vamos a hacer las introducciones en español, pero luego haremos la entrevista en inglés y desde YouTube ustedes podrán activar los subtítulos en español y la traducción. Así que el arquitecto McGregor en su firma con Coxal lleva una práctica que intenta asistir a las ciudades y a las comunidades donde trabajan para tener unos desarrollos productivos y más sostenibles. El arquitecto está en el país por el Congreso de Seattle, que promueve la Universidad Nacional Pedro Enrique Sureña. Es un congreso internacional de arquitectura y urbanismo. Así que, welcome, Adrian, to Urbanistica Podcast and also to the city of Santo Domingo. It is a pleasure to have you here and to have this conversation that I know it will be very interesting for our audience.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Okay. So we would like to start with your personal motivations. What drives you to do what you do?
I'm very passionate about cities and helping people improve their cities and seeing how we can meet the challenges that we have in terms of climate change, making our cities more resilient, continuing to have prosperity and livability, and to really build better places and more wonderful places for us to live.
Yes. So can you tell us a little bit about the projects? What type of projects have you worked in and what countries have you worked in?
So the scale of projects I do starts right up at the city scale. So I've been lucky enough to work on the development of two new cities, one for 9 million people and one for 3 million people.
And
So
where? Where was it?
one of those is in the Middle East and the other is in China. So I've been, lucky to engage at that level in terms of developing strategy and policy for those kinds of large scale challenges, but then also working in urban kind of regeneration inside cities and precincts, and all the way down to site scale and delivering projects on the ground in smaller neighborhoods and in smaller places. And I've worked in many places around the world. Our firm has done work in most of the continents across the world, from master planning through to design and delivery of different work.
You also get to the scale of parks and public space and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, we do. We go right down to developing the drawings and the construction details and development of site design, and actually having public work and private work built.
Adrian, from describing the type of work that you're doing, and also for us researching a little bit of your practice, we noticed that you tend to connect precisely like across disciplines and scales that don't traditionally are seen. There's a sort of like a tradition of looking at the systems of a city by themselves. and you seem to really be connecting dots. Um, can you tell us like what have been some of the benefits or insights that you get from working that way? Why do you do it that way?
So I think in understanding cities and working with them, we really adopt systems thinking as a foundation for how we approach projects. And through Biourbanism, through my book, I've established 10 systems there that are kind of a lens for how you engage with the city. So systems thinking is a really useful way to be able to remind yourself of the different kind of inputs and outputs and metabolisms of a city so that you can use it to inform how you think and develop ideas and then get integrated solutions. So yeah, it's a good it's a model really for connecting the dots as you say.
Can you like give us an example just to illustrate like what that looks like in terms of a project?
Um, well, I think if you scale right up to a new city, for example, then clearly these integrations are really important. So for walkability, uh, you need to underpin that with mobility systems. So whether it be high-speed rail, metro, light rail, and of course, streets. And then that connects to infrastructure, which is obviously the building system, so where you place and put your built form. And then you need to have that underpinned by really intelligent water systems and energy systems, into renewables. So each system connects in a way that hopefully benefits the other systems. So that's the great cities do this really well. But obviously, I'll give you an example of a negative solution. It could be that you build a very large motorway on the waterfront of your major river, for example, and the motorway floods, and it disconnects the city from public access to the water. So that's a good example of a mobility system having a really negative impact on a water system, as an example.
Mhm. And since we are connecting dots, can you explain a little bit in a simple way so our audience can understand? How do you see the relationship between carbon footprint, the city, and how the city can help to mitigate or be resilient?
It, well, I think it's really interesting to understand that cities produce 75% of the world's greenhouse gases. So they are the largest emitter of carbon in the world. And more than half of us live in cities, I think 55%. And then, in the near future, that's likely to be 65%. So cities are the places where we live, and that's our habitat, if you like. And they create greenhouse gas. So carbon emissions come from construction in cement and steel, um, and the emissions from uh, mobility are very large, and also industrial and manufacturing activities are very large. And so energy, production of energy makes the largest contribution to the city's footprint. So if you can use renewable energy and you can electrify cars, freight, logistics, and building energy, then you can make very substantial reductions to your carbon footprint of the city. Interestingly enough, in my book, I kind of have a diagram where I describe the three largest cities in some of the largest countries and look at the carbon footprint of each in comparison to the total country footprint. And it's very interesting to see the huge contributions that those three largest cities in each country make to total national carbon emissions.
And the climate change has also a lot to do with also the cities and the carbon footprint and everything. So that's something that you also take a lot of consideration in, and that you also were talking in your book. right?
Yeah, I mean, carbon emissions, unfortunately, you can't see carbon. So when we burn fossil fuels, we ignite them, they create a gas. Unfortunately, that gas is invisible. So we, humans across the world, I think are struggling to really deal with carbon emissions because they're invisible. If you see pollution, it's much easier to act on it.
Mhm.
But these gases, when you burn a fossil fuel, whether it be gas or coal or oil, it creates this gas and it gets trapped in the troposphere. So it gets trapped in that layer which protects planet
Mhm.
Earth and keeps our oxygen in place. And it stays there and it's just floating around. And normally the planet's kind of nature is able to absorb it and sequester it and then convert it back into oxygen. So it's a very important part of ecology and environment, but there's too much of it and it's increasing and increasing. So this is causing the global warming where there's this blanket of gas that's trapping heat and it's warming our planet. And this is the thing that we're seeing already in our cities, the impacts. We're seeing the hurricanes, we're seeing the flooding, we're seeing the rain, torrential rain. All of these things are a result of this heating atmosphere that we have.
Yes, in Santo Domingo, we've had this summer specifically very high temperatures that are not normal for this time of the year and not normal in general. So we've seen it, and we also had important floatings that we never had before, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But since you've been talking about your book, we would like to get like a definition. What is biourbanism? That's the title of your book, right? So what could we say? It's a definition of biourbanism.
In the simplest terms, it's a way of thinking about cities as a part of nature. So it's a kind of an idea that to many people would seem quite foreign because you think of nature and you think of the city and even human beings as not being part of nature. But what my book proposes, in fact, is that the cities we build, I mean, human beings are part of nature. We're a mammal, Homo sapiens, and what we build on the planet uses natural resources, and we operate it and maintain it as an animal. And it's not unlike a beaver builds a dam or a termite builds a skyscraper city. We're simply an animal that's maintaining and building cities. So therefore, cities must be part of nature. They can't be anything else. They're not wild nature. They don't look like a forest. But they're a different kind of nature. And in the book, I describe this as an anthrome, which is a human modified nature, but it's still nature. So that's really the fundamental idea. And if you think about a city as being nature, then you start to think how to design it in a different way, in a more positive way.
Yeah, totally. That's a great way of seeing the relationship between cities and nature. Because we've talked it here. Sometimes people think that we, and by we I mean architects or landscape, want to have beautiful cities, which we want, but we think that the green layer, so to say, it's very important, and it's fundamental for the cities and the well-being, of course. And we know that you also have a biourbanism lab. So can you tell us a little bit what you do there, uh, if you do some experiments, or and if you work with some other like universities or other institutions?
Yeah, so after completing the book and creating the model, which is it's kind of a philosophical or, a
Mm.
working model, I wanted to ensure that we could actually be practical and that we could bring these ideas into cities and create, change, positive change. So we created the Biourbanism Lab, and it's really a group of researchers. most of our team has come from academia. So we have a number, there's sort of 6 or 8 PhDs. So they come from a way of thinking that creates a methodology, if you like, that can be supported. So this team is really building digital twins, which is kind of a digital copy of the physical world. And the easiest way to think about what a digital twin is to think of it as a sandbox. So in the sandbox, you can test different things. So you can run simulations, you can forecast future scenarios, you can look at planning options and test what the impact they have. So it's a great sandbox for analysis. And digital tools now are, well, we know that they're really, really powerful. The amount of data we have access to is incredible. So we're able to really, at the largest scale, to bring in planetary information. So groups like the IPCC, NASA, and some of these incredible organizations are producing information. And as designers, it's rare for us to kind of ingest that data, if you like, and use it to inform our work. That's really what we're doing. We're trying to use science and connect to that global science and even national or local data, input it and ingest it into our sandbox, and then play around with different simulations, forecasts, especially with relation to climate change, where we're looking at, a 2050 scenario or 2100 scenario. And the really important thing for all designers and planners to think about now is that what we're designing is not for today, because we can't think like that. We have to design for tomorrow, and tomorrow is very, very different. That's where simulation and forecasting is important, because it's a different world. So our clients are producing cities, building cities, developing places, but these places we know are going to be very different to today. And this is where the data and the digital twin is a great tool to make a more intelligent design outcome.
It's very interesting what you say, because since we've been talking, I've been thinking about all the things that we've developed in this first season, and data is one of them. So we, as Dominican Republic and also as Santo Domingo and the largest cities here, need a lot of data precisely to do what you do, to be able to plan, not for now, but for the long term, what is going tomorrow. So my next question will be, in this lab, the idea, and that is the question, is to these findings that you do there, put it into your works, right? Have you got already the chance to experiment the findings in the lab, in the projects?
Yeah, we have. So we will often write a project methodology where we integrate the lab as a way to provide the front end science, if you like.
Mhm.
So, understanding the site, the culture, geography, climate, all these things. So yes, we've done it. We do it many times. And in fact, it usually is integrated into most of our projects. I think what's really interesting for the sort of Latin American nations is that data, there might be a kind of less availability of public information. However, now using things like AI, you can actually use satellite photography, aerial photography, and you can run some pretty good kind of analysis over an aerial photo, and the AI starts to build up the map for you and convert that into data sets. And we're seeing more and more of that developed. So in the past, you had to do very expensive ground surveys, had to fly airplanes, with scanners, and it's complex and kind of long timeframes to bring in information. But now with AI, these algorithms are starting to be able to read things quickly and generate mapping. So it's very powerful and useful, because you can do it on the desktop in the computer instead, at much cheaper cost, and start to build up, as you mentioned, for Santo Domingo or any of the cities, kind of quick data sets that readily available to start work and make use.
Great. So we're going to a break and then we'll be back with this interesting conversation.
So welcome back. And Adrian, you were speaking about the lab and the model and this relationship of like testing things and actual projects. And I guess I'm curious to hear about what type of insight have you been able to gain? Because in principle, a lot of the data is sort of like documenting what has happened, and you are talking about forecasting and using data to also forecast. So I wonder how that is actually kind of how it happens in real life, in real time, to be able to implement the forecasting, but also what kind of surprising insights or like new ways of looking at a problem because yielding for you guys.
So some of the very interesting insights that we've been able to find through some of the analysis is things like understanding where people are at a city in particular times. So, for example, you could have a football match, and at that particular time, by using kind of phone data, you can really understand the size of the crowd, where they are at certain points. How did they arrive at the game? Where did they go? So you can start to stress test, in the city, kind of big events, if you like, to understand how did the city deal with it? Was it congested? Or, how long did it take people to move away? Could they get out quickly? That's just one example. On your main streets, your shopping streets, where you need to understand what parts of the city might be in decline. So why are people not shopping in certain places? Why are they going to another street, which is, really popular? So we know that, these things, the kind of economics of the city change. So some of that information is really interesting to be able to try and invigorate the public life, and to bring, pedestrians back into streets and work out what's going wrong. Why is the city not performing very well? Why are people not coming? So that's one good example. I think another one is urban heat. So what we're able to do now is to read the city's kind of surfaces and work out where is it hot and where is it cool. So again, you mentioned here in Dominican Republic that you're experiencing high temperatures, and that we all know, we're seeing it all around the world. Temperatures are rising. So understanding where the heat is in the city is important, because you try to cool down places, especially in public, places where you want people to be able to move more comfortably. Flooding is another one. So obviously understanding, and I think one of the issues now is that the engineers are running flood models using yesterday's information and not looking forward. So again, you've seen incredible flooding here in the city, and you need to understand in the future how that's going to change, where a place is going to flood more, more often, how deep will the flooding be, so you can deal with it. So I think there's kind of three practical examples there of how this information can help you do better planning and make changes to the city.
It's interesting because you've talked about flooding. And here in Santo Domingo, the last 2 Novembers, we've had raining events. So we got, in a very short period of time, a lot of rain, more than typical. And we had floods in the center of the city that produced loss of people and also property. But most of all, what we, the people that we lost is our greatest thing. So, what is your experience managing these events? And maybe what are some strategies that we could integrate in stormwater management in order to get it in the landscape of the city?
So, unfortunately, our city forefathers often built the cities on top of either areas that were swamp and wetland, or they built over the top of, creeks and waterways, and these have been covered in concrete. So, and then most of our cities are impervious surface, things like concrete. So the water, it doesn't soak into the ground anymore. It just runs off very quickly. And you can see it here. Yesterday it rained quite heavily, and then within, a very short period of time, there's rivers of water running down the streets, because the water
Get through.
can't get through into the soil and down into the aquifer. So what it means is that as climate change impacts our cities, these big storms that you had, and I think it was 400 millimeters of rain in
Exactly.
like an hour or something.
Exactly, in an hour.
Incredible amount of water. And these kinds of patterns will increase. So, in some cities, they're going to see incredible drought. Rain will just move away, and they're going to have trouble with their water supply. And here, these extreme heavy events are going to create more and more flooding. So the thing is to start to look at, how do you plan for resilience? So what can you do to retrofit or change the city now to try and improve its ability to deal with water? And often that means removing concrete. It means bringing back natural waterways, using nature. Nature is the best engineer. It's an incredible engineer. We have a lot to learn from, how it designs things.
I love that quote.
So really it's
Notice,
recognizing that
I was gonna say in Europe, there's a whole movement to like rip up pavement in cities.
it's we have to be able to remove these concrete surfaces in order to let the city deal with this water in a better way. And of course, when you do that, you'll bring more green to the city anyway. So you're going to have more trees, more shade, which makes it cooler. It's going to be nicer city. So all these things are connected. Again, it's systems thinking. Water, green infrastructure, urban canopy, urban cooling. Then it impacts mobility, moving around in the flood. All these things are interrelated.
So we go back to the conversation where we started. So all the layers that you have in your book and that work together to make a city a better place if they are integrated the correct way, so to speak, and to give a lot of to give the place that nature has and give it back to the city, right, Claudia?
I think, I guess I was gonna ask you what is the biggest change in mindset, but from what I'm hearing, it is perhaps that because cities are ecosystems on themselves, and they are nature, and we are part of nature. That is perhaps the biggest mindset in terms of how do we look at our environment that we're creating, and that we're working with nature and nature's systems, as opposed to imposing a system in when you were just saying about building on top of wetlands or waterways that at the end have such a impact, right? Kind of because somehow nature reclaims the land, in a way. Um, so I guess, uh, is there any, I guess, what in your perspective in terms of mindset, like how can we look at things differently, so that we get better environment for the future? That the kind of that concept of what can resilience can look like, for our cities.
I think that there's a global discussion now around resilience. And it's interesting because in Australia and in the UK, and I think the US as well, there's a big push by insurance companies to try and get cities to think a lot more, you know, deeply about climate change, because when there's a really big event, there's a huge economic cost, obviously, to the insurance industries. So that push is coming from an economic sense, and there are many places now where the flooding is so bad that you can't insure a property any longer. So there's a big flow-on impact for economics, but it's also human life too, of course. I mean, we don't want, you know, floods are deadly. They are, and so are heat waves. So it's about protecting human life in our cities, and trying to keep them economically competitive. So resilience is really important in that sense. And I think the other thing that's happening in terms of global kind of funding of projects, both to government and to private corporations, is that the big superannuation funds or retirement funds, they have their own corporate objectives, their ESG guidelines, and they won't lend to a project that has a climate hazard. So we're going to see more and more investigation to prove up, does this urban development have big climate risk? If it does, then it won't be funded through some of these bigger global funds. So that's also happening. So funding and insurance are moving quickly, and also climate reporting and disclosure. So we're going to see, it's already happening, government and corporations. I think the US has already switched on it on, seeing it in other countries where you must disclose on your balance sheet all the properties, the real estate assets, and other things that are at risk from climate change, because clearly they have a diminishing value in the future. So there's a lot of kind of factors driving a move towards resilience, which is really important because we need to be doing this really fast. So decarbonizing as fast as we can, plus building out our city plans to make sure that we can reduce the risk to these increasing hazards.
It's great that a lot of actors are coming together in the conversation, because we have to do it all. We will also want to go into the technical part a little bit. Your firm uses Vectorworks as a software. Can you tell us a little bit about how do you manage that? What findings have you got in a positive way? How does it helps you to deliver your work?
Yeah, look, I've been using Vectorworks personally for many years. And our company, you know, we use a lot of different kinds of software, like all businesses. But we, as I've been talking about the digital twins and this kind of sandbox, we use a lot of geospatial modeling, which is GIS software. So it's an amazing, powerful tool for big scale mapping. But what we do then is we connect our Vectorworks files to the GIS and geospatial information. So there's a linkage between the two. And then that enables us to start our design work, master planning, and then moving all the way into BIM, building information modeling in a more detailed way. So there's a great connection between strategic planning and mapping, and then connecting to a actual design file, and then moving through design, especially in 3D, three-dimensional design, and then moving through and then continuing all the way down the journey to a completed set of drawings. So I think that's a really powerful workflow, and we try to do that as much as possible. So it's one of the things I really enjoy about Vectorworks is that geospatial connection that they've made, and I love the 3D modeling capacity and the site site design is very, very powerful. So yeah, there's a lot of things I really enjoy about working with it.
Okay, great. Claudia, back to Santo
Great.
Domingo.
Yes. So Adrian, we have reached the section of some surprise questions that we have for you. And one of them is, what I know you haven't been in the country for too long, but what are your impressions of Santo Domingo so far?
I think the food is amazing. I've had so much incredible food. It's been really wonderful. Um, the other thing is, I think the city life, people here are really, you're quite flamboyant, and there's a real kind of sense of energy in the city, which I think is quite amazing. You hear conversation, you hear energy, you hear noise. It's an animated place. The public spaces, streets are very, very animated, which has been wonderful. And I was lucky enough to come into Cap Cana and to see that environment. And it's, absolutely just magical, beautiful. So I can see that in my kind of short impression so far that it's a wonderful country of incredible biodiversity and nature, with some very large, Santo Domingo is a very large and growing city with a lot of challenges. Clearly, the mobility issues here are really, top of mind. And I think probably everyone in the city would agree that the amount of time they're spending in a private vehicle is not positive to their, sort of lifestyle, if you like. So there's certainly a big challenge there around mobility and how do we improve how people move around the city. And also, I think making sure that the expansion of the city doesn't continue to burden the natural environment. So you need good planning to make sure that the city doesn't, eat up more and more of your incredible biodiversity and nature. So that's where biourbanism, I think, as a concept is really important here for the city. As it develops, do it in a way that works with nature, not against it. And you'll get, some really wonderful new precincts in the city as it grows. So you've got some work to do to kind of change and retrofit the downtown and the existing, city footprint, and then to be very careful about how it grows. And the other cities in the country too. How do you work with their development so that it's positive, and resilient to climate too? Things like hurricanes, flooding, heat. You have all of these very important, growing hazards to be taken care of as you design. So it's your city planning here. You want to be very careful about building resilience and doing this thing, in a way that's beneficial for the country.
Yes. And which word would you say will describe the city? One word,
I would say vibrant.
vibrant. Okay. And why is that? Because of the people you said?
Yeah, it absolutely. It's just the life of the city. It's pulsing. It's alive. It feels alive, and that's it's really wonderful.
Great.
And what color would you use to describe the city of Santo Domingo?
Possibly, I would say it is maybe a grey. I think there's too much concrete, and I'd love to shift that to more of a green.
Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to meet you. I'm gonna let Michelle wrap it up, but just wanted to say thank you so much for the opportunity to having this chat with you.
Yes. So, Adrian, it's been a pleasure for us to have you here with this really interesting point of view, biourbanism. And I really like your quote. You say that nature is the greatest structure, system,
Artist engineer.
greatest engineer. Exactly. So I really like that quote. And I think it wraps up all the conversation. So the relationship between the city and the nature. So it's a pleasure to have you here. We hope that you have a great stay here in the Dominican Republic and to see you back again. And maybe why not share your thoughts and everything with some of our schools that I think it's very necessary to, as you said, we have to think forward. So these people that is coming up and that will build the cities, it is important that they have this perspective also. So thank you very much and your stay here. Y a ustedes muchísimas gracias por seguirnos una vez más en este episodio extraordinario, esta gran conversación que tuvimos. Por favor, déjennos su feedback. Nos encantaría oír cuáles son las ideas que ustedes tienen para la próxima temporada. Y muchas gracias a nuestros patrocinadores. No se olviden de buscarnos en Instagram, en YouTube, de darle la campanita y dejarnos sus comentarios. Muchas gracias.